Audrey Mitchell's heart hammered against her ribs as she gripped her phone, staring at the text message that had just arrived. "I'm outside your building. We need to talk." Her ex-boyfriend Tyler had been calling and texting for weeks since their breakup. She peered through the blinds of the trendy downtown Chicago bar where she'd been enjoying after-work drinks with her best friend Melissa. "He's out there," Audrey whispered, her voice tight with anxiety. "Tyler's actually followed me here." Melissa glanced toward the entrance, her expression hardening. "That's crossing a line. Should we call security?" "No," Audrey said, tugging nervously at her caramel-colored hair. "He'll just cause a scene." At 28, Audrey had worked too hard building her reputation at Pinnacle Innovations to have it tarnished by public drama. 6 months into her role as marketing coordinator, she was finally finding her footing at the prestigious tech company. Tyler's persistence had grown concerning. What had begun as occasional "I miss you" texts had escalated to showing up unannounced at places he knew she frequented. Their 8-month relationship had ended when Audrey discovered he'd been hiding a gambling problem and a substantial debt he'd expected her to help pay. "I have an idea," Melissa said suddenly, scanning the crowded bar. Her gaze locked on a man sitting alone at the corner of the bar, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in an expensive-looking charcoal suit that contrasted with the more casual attire of the Friday night crowd. "See that guy? He looks harmless enough, and definitely not Tyler's type to pick a fight with." "What are you suggesting?" Audrey asked, though she already suspected Melissa's plan. "We'll walk past him toward the exit. When Tyler sees us, kiss the stranger just for a second. Tyler's possessive enough that seeing you with someone else might finally get the message across." "That's insane," Audrey protested, but her options were limited. Tyler had already started calling again, her phone vibrating insistently in her hand. "Do you have a better idea?" Melissa challenged. Audrey took a deep breath. "Fine. But if this backfires spectacularly, I'm blaming you." They gathered their belongings and moved toward the exit. The stranger at the bar was nursing what looked like whiskey, his attention focused on some documents spread before him. As they approached, Audrey noted his strong profile, the slight shadow of stubble along his jaw, and the way his dark hair was neatly styled, yet slightly tousled, as if he'd run his fingers through it multiple times. When they were a few feet away, Melissa whispered, "Tyler just walked in. He's looking this way." Panic flared in Audrey's chest. Without giving herself time to reconsider, she turned to the stranger. "I'm so sorry about this," she murmured before leaning closer and saying in a voice just loud enough to be overheard, "Kiss me just for a second." "He's watching." The stranger's eyes, a startling shade of blue, widened momentarily in surprise. Then, with unexpected smoothness, he set down his drink and turned toward her. Time seemed to slow as his hand gently cooped her face, and his lips met hers in what was meant to be a brief, perfunctory kiss, but nothing about the moment felt perfunctory. A jolt of electricity shot through Audrey as their lips touched, and what should have been a second stretched longer. The background noise of the bar faded away. When they finally broke apart, Audrey found herself breathless. "Ex-friend?" the stranger asked quietly, his voice a low rumble that sent another unexpected shiver through her. "Yes," she managed, acutely aware that she was blushing. "I'm really sorry." "Don't be," he replied with a slight smile. "Happy to help." Melissa tugged at her arm. "It worked. Tyler's leaving and he looks furious. Let's go while we have the chance." Audrey nodded, still flustered. "Thank you," she told the stranger, already backing away. "Anytime," he responded, his expression unreadable as he returned to his documents. Melissa couldn't contain her excitement. That was not just a polite peck, Audrey. There was definitely something happening there. "It was nothing," Audrey insisted, trying to ignore the lingering sensation of the stranger's lips on hers. "Just good acting on both our parts." Monday morning arrived with a flurry of activity at Pinnacle Innovations. Audrey rushed into the elevator, barely making it before the doors closed. Her weekend had been surprisingly peaceful. No calls or texts from Tyler. Perhaps Melissa's outrageous plan had actually worked. "Hold the elevator," called a male voice from the lobby. Audrey automatically pressed the door open button, only to freeze when the man who entered was none other than her stranger from the bar. He seemed equally surprised, pausing momentarily before stepping inside. Up close in the harsh lighting of the elevator, Audrey could see that his eyes weren't just blue, but an intense shade that bordered on sapphire. He wore a different suit today, navy with a subtle pinstripe, and carried a sleek leather briefcase. "Good morning," he said, his voice infused with amusement. "Fancy meeting you here." Audrey's mind raced. He worked at Pinnacle. How had she never seen him before? The company employed hundreds of people across multiple floors, but still, surely she would have noticed him. "Hi," she managed, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "I am about Friday night." "No explanations necessary," he said easily. Ex-friends can be complicated. The elevator stopped at the 12th floor marketing where Audrey worked. "This is me," she said, stepping forward. Then impulsively, "I'm Audrey, by the way." "Audrey Mitchell. Nice to officially meet you, Audrey Mitchell," he replied with a smile that transformed his face, creating small lines at the corners of his eyes. "I'm Daniel." The doors began to close, and Audrey hurried off, not catching his last name. Her morning proceeded normally until the department-wide email arrived just before lunch. The subject line read, "An announcement, new CEO, introduction meeting, mandatory attendance." Audrey skimmed the message, which explained that following the recent retirement of Howard Pinnacle, the company's founder and CEO, his successor, would be formally introduced to all staff at 2 p.m. in the main conference center. "Did you know about this?" Audrey asked her cubicle neighbor Ryan. "Heard rumors?" Ryan replied, not looking up from his computer. "Apparently, the new CEO has been working quietly from the executive floor for a couple weeks, meeting with department heads. Some kind of soft transition before the official announcement." At precisely 2 p.m., Audrey found herself squeezed into the packed conference center with the rest of Pinnacle's employees. The company's chief operating officer, Vera Winters, approached the podium first, giving a brief speech about Howard Pinnacle's legacy and the company's future. "And now," Vera concluded, "I'm pleased to introduce our new chief executive officer, who many of you know from his previous role as head of strategic development, Daniel Harrington." Audrey's world tilted sideways as the stranger from the bar, her elevator companion from that morning, walked confidently onto the stage. Daniel Harrington, the new CEO of Pinnacle Innovations, the man she had impulsively kissed 3 days ago. As Daniel began his address to the company, his gaze swept across the room and for just a moment seemed to pause on her. A knowing smile played at the corner of his mouth, so brief she might have imagined it before he continued his speech about vision and innovation and the bright future of Pinnacle. Audrey barely heard a word, her mind reeling with the implications. She had kissed the CEO. She had kissed her boss's boss's boss, technically, and tomorrow she was scheduled to present the quarterly marketing strategy to the executive team, which would now include Daniel Harrington. "Are you okay?" Melissa, who worked in HR, whispered from beside her. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," Audrey whispered back. "Remember the stranger from Friday night?" Melissa followed her gaze to Daniel on stage, his commanding presence holding the attention of everyone in the room. Everyone except Audrey, who was fighting the urge to slide under her chair and disappear. Melissa's eyes widened in comprehension, and then she had to clamp a hand over her mouth to stifle what would have been an inappropriately loud reaction. "Oh my God," she finally managed in a hushed whisper. "You kissed the CEO. I need to quit immediately." "Tonight," Audrey declared, pacing the small kitchen of Melissa's apartment. After the announcement, she had somehow maintained her composure through the remainder of the workday before fleeing to her friend's place for an emergency crisis session. "Don't be ridiculous," Melissa replied, handing Audrey a glass of red wine. "You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't know who he was." "I kissed the CEO. Mel, the CEO." Audrey took a large gulp of wine. "How am I supposed to face him tomorrow? I have to present our entire marketing strategy to the executive team. Look at it this way," Melissa reasoned, settling onto a bar stool. "If he wanted to make an issue of it, he could have said something this morning in the elevator, but he didn't." "He was cool about it," Audrey groaned. "That's almost worse. He probably thinks I'm some desperate woman who goes around kissing strangers in bars." Tossin Melissa countered. He thinks you're a resourceful woman who found a creative solution to a problem which you are. Audrey wasn't convinced, but as the evening wore on and they dissected every possible angle, she reluctantly accepted that quitting her job over an awkward misunderstanding would be an overreaction. She had worked too hard to earn her position at Pinnacle. Besides, Melissa pointed out as Audrey was leaving, Pinnacle has over 500 employees. How often will you actually interact with the CEO? You'll probably never even be alone with him again. Audrey spent the night rehearsing her presentation, determined to be so thoroughly prepared that nothing could throw her off, not even the memory of Daniel Harrington's surprising gentleness or the unexpected spark she had felt when their lips met. The next morning, Audrey arrived at work an hour early to set up in the executive conference room. She had just finished arranging her handouts when the door opened, and Daniel Harrington walked in alone. "Good morning, Audrey," he said, casual and composed in a light gray suit that complemented his eyes. "I thought I'd come early to review the agenda before everyone else arrives." Audrey straightened, willing her voice to remain steady. "Mr. Harrington, good morning." "Daniel, please," he corrected, setting his leather portfolio on the table. "Mr. Harrington was my father." He paused, regarding her with that same hint of amusement she'd noticed in the elevator. "I believe we've moved past formalities, don't you think?" The reference to their encounter hung in the air between them. Audrey felt heat rising to her cheeks, but forced herself to maintain eye contact. "About that," she began, "I want to apologize again for Friday night. It was completely unprofessional, and if I had known who you were, you would have chosen a different stranger," he finished, the corner of his mouth quirking up. Despite her nervousness, Audrey found herself smiling. Probably one with less organizational authority. Daniel laughed, a warm sound that somehow eased some of the tension in the room. "Fair enough, but I'm glad you didn't know. It was refreshing. In my position, people rarely act naturally around me." Audrey wasn't sure how to respond to that, so she busied herself with straightening her already perfectly aligned presentation materials. "Is he still bothering you?" Daniel asked after a moment. "Who?" "Your ex. The reason for our impromptu performance." "Oh no." Actually, Audrey was surprised to realize she hadn't thought about Tyler since the incident. "That seems to have worked. Thank you for being a good sport." Daniel nodded, then gestured to her materials. "So, quarterly marketing strategy. I've been looking forward to this presentation. Howard spoke highly of your department's innovative approach." The conversation shifted to business, and Audrey was grateful for the familiar territory. By the time the other executives began filing in, she felt almost normal, almost able to look at Daniel without remembering the feel of his hand against her face, the unexpected softness of his lips. Her presentation went flawlessly. Audrey had always been good at public speaking, and with preparation, her confidence overrode her nerves. Throughout her talk, she was acutely aware of Daniel watching her with interest, occasionally nodding or making notes. When she finished, the CMO, Janet Reynolds, was the first to applaud. "Excellent work, Audrey," Janet said. "The social media strategy you've outlined is exactly the direction we need to go." The other executives offered similar praise, and by the time the meeting concluded, Audrey felt a surge of professional satisfaction that momentarily overshadowed her personal discomfort. As everyone gathered their materials to leave, Daniel approached her. "Impressive presentation," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I'd like to discuss some of your ideas further. Are you free for lunch tomorrow?" Audrey's mind raced through the implications. Lunch with the CEO. Was this professional or personal? And did it matter? Either way, refusing seemed unwise. "Yes, I'm free," she replied, striving for a casual tone. "Good. Noon. Then I'll have my assistant send the details." Daniel left before she could respond, leaving Audrey to wonder what exactly she had agreed to. Word traveled fast at Pinnacle. By mid-afternoon, Ryan was peering over their shared cubicle wall. "So," he said, attempting nonchalance, "rumor has it you're having lunch with the new boss tomorrow." Audrey kept her eyes on her computer screen. "It's a business lunch, Ryan. He wants to discuss the marketing strategy further." "Uh-huh," Ryan replied, unconvinced. "You know he doesn't do that with everyone, right?" Janet's been trying to get one-on-one time with him since he arrived. I'm sure it's nothing special, Audrey insisted, though doubt nagged at her. Was this normal CEO behavior, or was there more to it? She found Melissa in the break room later that afternoon. Daniel asked me to lunch tomorrow, she said without preamble. To discuss my presentation. Melissa's eyebrows shot up. Interesting. It's just business, Audrey stated firmly. Maybe, Melissa conceded. Or maybe he felt the same spark you did. Don't be ridiculous. He's the CEO. CEOs are human. Too. Melissa pointed out with lips that you've already kissed. Audrey groaned. Not helpful. That evening, Audrey spent an inordinate amount of time deciding what to wear the next day. A process she told herself was merely professional preparation. Nothing to do with Daniel's startlingly blue eyes or the memory of his smile. She settled on a tailored navy dress that was formal enough for business, but still flattering. Professional, she reminded herself. This is purely professional. The next day, Daniel's assistant, a poised woman named Vivian, appeared at Audrey's desk precisely at noon. Ms. Mitchell, I'm to escort you to Mr. Harrington's private dining room. Private dining room? Audrey hadn't even known the executive floor had such amenities. She followed Vivian to the elevator, acutely aware of the curious glances from her coworkers. The executive floor was a world apart from the open-plan office where Audrey worked. Plush carpeting muffled their footsteps, and original artwork adorned the walls. Vivian led her to a room at the end of the hallway, knocked once, and then opened the door. The space inside was intimate, a small dining room with a table set for two beside a wall of windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. Daniel stood as she entered, and Vivian quietly disappeared, closing the door behind her. Audrey, thank you for joining me. Daniel gestured to the chair across from him. Thank you for the invitation, she replied, taking her seat and placing her napkin in her lap, grateful for the familiar ritual of formal dining that gave her something to do with her hands. I hope you don't mind, Daniel continued, but I took the liberty of ordering for us. The chef here makes an excellent salmon. That sounds perfect. Audrey noted that 2 glasses of water had already been poured, but no wine. Keeping it professional, she thought with relief. I wanted to discuss your presentation in more detail, Daniel began, his manner entirely businesslike, particularly your ideas about experiential marketing. The conversation flowed easily as they discussed marketing strategies, consumer engagement, and the future direction of Pinnacle. Audrey found herself relaxing as the meal progressed. Daniel was insightful and genuinely interested in her ideas, asking thoughtful questions that pushed her to elaborate on concepts she had only touched on in her presentation, did I have to say. Daniel remarked as they finished their meal, Your approach reminds me of my mother's work. She was in marketing as well, though in a different era. She always emphasized the emotional connection with consumers. Was Audrey asked, noting the past tense. A shadow crossed Daniel's face. She passed away 5 years ago. Cancer, I'm sorry, Audrey said softly. Daniel nodded his acknowledgement. She would have liked you. Your passion for what you do, it's evident in how you speak about your work. The comment delivered so simply touched Audrey unexpectedly. For a moment, the professional veneer between them thinned, revealing glimpses of the people behind their work roles. The moment was interrupted by Vivian's discreet knock. Mr. Harrington, your 1 o'clock is here. Daniel glanced at his watch, surprise registering on his face. I didn't realize the time. Thank you, Audrey, for sharing your insights. I'd like to continue this conversation soon. As Audrey returned to her desk, she found herself analyzing every nuance of their interaction. Had it been strictly professional, or was there something more? And why did it matter so much to her either way? Her phone buzzed with a text from Melissa. How was lunch with the boss? Details required. Before Audrey could respond, another message arrived. This one from a number she didn't recognize. Dinner tonight. I promise not to talk business. Daniel. Audrey stared at her phone, her heart racing. This was definitely crossing the line from professional to personal. She should say no. It was complicated, potentially messy, possibly against company policy. The rational part of her brain presented a dozen reasons to decline. Yet her fingers typed yes. What time? This is a mistake. Audrey muttered to herself as she checked her appearance one final time. She had changed outfits 3 times before settling on a simple black dress that struck the right balance between elegant and not trying too hard. Daniel had suggested they meet at Ellison's, an upscale restaurant overlooking the Chicago River. Not Pinnacle's building, not his place, not hers. Neutral territory. That had to mean something, though Audrey wasn't sure what. She had told Melissa about the dinner invitation, enduring her friend's excited speculation with as much patience as she could muster. "Just be careful," Melissa had eventually advised, her tone turning serious. "Office relationships are complicated enough. Add in the power dynamic with him, being CEO. It's just dinner," Audrey had insisted. But standing outside Ellison's in the cool evening air, she couldn't deny that her rapid pulse had nothing to do with the brisk walk from the taxi. The maitre led her to a secluded table where Daniel was already seated. He stood as she approached, and Audrey was struck again by his presence, confident, yet without the arrogance she'd observed in other executives. He wore dark trousers and a blue button-down shirt that made his eyes seem even more intense. "You look beautiful," he said simply, holding her chair. "Thank you." Audrey settled into her seat, grateful for the dim lighting that concealed her blush. "This place is lovely. Have you been here before?" "A few times for business dinners," Daniel replied, signaling for the sommelier, "but never for a more pleasant occasion." The implication hung in the air. This was definitely not a business dinner. The sommelier appeared, and Daniel ordered a bottle of wine after a brief consultation with Audrey about her preferences. So Daniel began once they were alone again. "Now that we've agreed to banish business talk, tell me about Audrey Mitchell outside of Pinnacle." It was a simple question, yet Audrey found herself momentarily stumped. How long had it been since someone had shown genuine interest in her life beyond work? "Well," she started, "I grew up in Wisconsin, small town close to Madison, moved to Chicago for college, and never left. I love the energy of the city." "What brought you to Pinnacle?" Daniel asked, then caught himself with a smile.
"Sorry.
"That veers into business territory, I'll allow it," Audrey replied, feeling some of her nervousness ease. "I was with a smaller marketing firm before, but I wanted to work somewhere with more impact. Pinnacle's commitment to innovation aligned with my interests." The conversation flowed surprisingly easily. Daniel told her about growing up in Boston, the son of a marketing executive mother and a university professor father. He spoke of his passion for sailing, a hobby inherited from his grandfather, and his volunteer work with the youth mentoring program. "What about your family?" Daniel asked as their entree arrived. "Are they still in Wisconsin?" "My parents are," Audrey nodded. "My younger brother moved to Seattle last year for a job in tech. We're close, though not geographically at the moment. And they're proud of you," Daniel observed. "I can tell by how you talk about them." "They are," Audrey agreed. "Though I think they'd prefer I was a little closer to home. My mom drops hints about job openings in Madison whenever we talk." Daniel laughed, and Audrey found herself captivated by the way his entire face transformed with genuine amusement. This was a different man than the composed CEO who had addressed the company. As dinner progressed, Audrey realized with surprise that she was enjoying herself immensely. There was an easiness between them that defied their brief acquaintance. When Daniel spoke, he listened to her responses with genuine interest, not merely waiting for his turn to talk. A quality Audrey had found rare in her previous dating experiences. "What about you?" Audrey asked after Daniel had shared a particularly amusing story about his first sailing mishap. "Have you ever been married?" A flicker of something, pain, regret, crossed Daniel's face so quickly, Audrey almost missed it. "No," he replied. "I was engaged once about 7 years ago." "What happened?" Audrey asked, then immediately backtracked. "I'm sorry, that's personal." "You don't have to." "It's fine," Daniel assured her. "Camille was brilliant, a human rights attorney with more passion and drive than anyone I'd ever met. We were together for 3 years, but in the end, our careers pulled us in different directions. She got an opportunity with an international NGO, her dream job, but it meant relocating to Geneva. I was just starting to gain traction at Pinnacle. Long distance wasn't an option." Daniel's smile turned rueful. "We tried for 6 months, but we were both working 80-hour weeks in different time zones. the relationship couldn't sustain it. I'm sorry, Audrey said softly. Daniel shrugged, but Audrey's sense of casualness was at least partly feigned. It was for the best. We wanted different things ultimately. What about you? Any almost marriages in your past? Audrey laughed. No, nothing that's serious. My longest relationship was 2 years during college. Since then, it's been a series of almost but not quite connections. She paused, then added with a wry smile. And one unexpected gambling addict. Yes, the ex from the bar, Daniel recalled. I've been meaning to ask, did our little performance permanently solve that problem? Actually, yes. He texted once more that night to say he got the message and hasn't contacted me since. Good, Daniel said, his voice taking on an edge that sent an unexpected thrill through Audrey. He seemed like the type to cause trouble. You could tell that from the 10 seconds you saw him. I'm a good judge of character, Daniel replied with a confident half-smile. It's part of my job. As they lingered over dessert and coffee, Audrey found herself wishing the evening wouldn't end. Despite her initial reservations, she couldn't deny the connection she felt with Daniel. It wasn't just physical attraction, though that was undeniably present. There was something more, an intellectual compatibility, a shared perspective on life, despite their different backgrounds. When the bill came, Daniel insisted on paying. I invited you, he said firmly when Audrey protested. Next time can be your treat. Next time? The casual assumption that there would be a next time sent a flutter of anticipation through her. Outside the restaurant, the night air had cooled further, and Audrey suppressed a shiver. Without comment, Daniel removed his jacket and draped it around her shoulders. Thank you, she said, suddenly acutely aware of their proximity on the nearly deserted sidewalk. For dinner and for this. My pleasure. Daniel's voice was low, his gaze holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Audrey, I know this is complicated. The company, our position's very complicated, she agreed, yet found herself stepping imperceptibly closer to him. I don't usually do complicated, Daniel continued. In fact, I've made it a rule to keep my professional and personal lives entirely separate. That seems wise, Audrey murmured, though her eyes had dropped to his lips. Extremely wise, Daniel agreed, even as his hand came up to gently brush a strand of hair from her face. Which is why I should probably put you in a taxi and say goodnight. Probably, Audrey whispered. Neither of them moved. The moment stretched between them to with possibility. Then Daniel's phone rang, the harsh electronic tone shattering the spell. He closed his eyes briefly in frustration before checking the screen. I have to take this, he said with genuine regret. It's the Tokyo office. Audrey nodded, stepping back as reality reasserted itself. Of course. Daniel answered the call, his voice immediately shifting to a more formal tone as he spoke to whoever was on the line. While he was distracted, Audrey flagged down a passing taxi. I should go, she mouthed when he glanced her way. Daniel nodded, covering the phone briefly. I'll call you tomorrow, he promised before returning to his conversation. Audrey slipped into the taxi, giving her address to the driver. As they pulled away, she looked back to see Daniel still standing on the sidewalk, phone to his ear, watching her depart. He raised his free hand in a farewell gesture that made her smile, despite the interrupted moment. The next morning, Audrey arrived at work to find a package on her desk, a small, elegant box with no card. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a miniature sailboat. Secret admirer? Ryan asked, peering over the cubicle wall. Something like that, Audrey replied, unable to suppress her smile as she fastened the bracelet around her wrist. Her phone buzzed with a text. Dinner was perfect. Rain check on that good night. D. Before she could reply, her desk phone rang. It was Janet, the CMO. Audrey, good morning, Janet began, her tone unusually formal. I need to see you in my office immediately, of course, Audrey replied, puzzlement replacing her earlier happiness. I'll be right there. Janet's office door was closed when Audrey arrived, unusual for the typically open-door executive. She knocked tentatively. Come in, Janet called. Audrey entered to find not only Janet, but also Vera Winters, the COO, and Patricia from Human Resources. Their expressions were uniformly grim. "Please sit down." Janet gestured to the empty chair facing the three women. Audrey complied, her mind racing. Had something happened with her presentation? Was there a problem with the marketing strategy, Audrey? Janet began carefully. "It has come to our attention that you may be engaging in a personal relationship with Daniel Harrington." The bluntness of the statement caught Audrey off guard. We had dinner," she admitted, seeing no point in denial. "I see." Janet nodded. "You understand that this creates a significant conflict of interest." "We're just getting to know each other," Audrey protested. "It's not. Company policy is clear." Vera interrupted, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Relationships between executives and subordinates must be disclosed and managed appropriately to prevent favoritism or the appearance of favoritism." Patricia slid a document across the desk. "This is a formal notice requiring you to either terminate the personal relationship or accept a transfer to our Seattle office, where you would report to a different executive chain." "Seattle?" Audrey echoed in disbelief. "But my life is here, my friends, my apartment." "We understand this is difficult," Patricia said, her professional sympathy doing little to soften the blow, "but the integrity of the company's leadership structure must be maintained." "Does Daniel know about this?" Audrey asked, her mind still struggling to process the sudden ultimatum. The three women exchanged glances. "Mr. Harrington is being informed of the situation separately," Janet finally said. "I need time to think," Audrey said, her voice barely steady. "Of course," Vera nodded. "You have 48 hours to make your decision." Audrey left the office in a daze, the document clutched in her hand. She had just returned to her desk when her phone buzzed with another text from Daniel. "Emergency board meeting. Can we talk tonight?" She stared at the message, emotions swirling. One dinner. They'd had one dinner, and already her career was in jeopardy. Was whatever this was between them worth such drastic changes to her life? Before she could respond, another text arrived from a different number, one she hadn't seen in weeks. "We need to talk," Tyler wrote. "I know about you and Harrington. Meet me or I go to the press." Audrey's blood ran cold. How could Tyler possibly know? And what exactly did he think he knew? The bracelet on her wrist suddenly felt heavy. The charm no longer whimsical, but a weight, dragging her down into complications she hadn't anticipated. She had 48 hours to decide her future. A threatening ex reappearing at the worst possible moment, and a relationship that had barely begun already demanding life-altering choices. Her phone buzzed again with a call from Daniel, but Audrey let it go to voicemail as she tried to figure out what to do next. Audrey stared at Tyler's text message, her mind racing. The threat was clear, but how had he even known about her dinner with Daniel? She hadn't posted anything on social media, hadn't told anyone except Melissa. Her phone buzzed again. Daniel calling a second time. With trembling fingers, she answered. "Audrey." His voice was tight with tension. "I just came out of a meeting with the board. I need to see you." "I know about the policy," she said quietly. "Human Resources already gave me the ultimatum. Seattle or..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "This isn't just about the policy," Daniel replied. "There's more." "Can you meet me?" "Not at the office." "Where?" "There's a coffee shop 2 blocks from Pinnacle. The Daily Grind. 20 minutes. I'll be there." Audrey agreed, her anxiety mounting. Before leaving, she showed Tyler's message to Melissa, who frowned deeply. "This is harassment, Audrey. You should report it." "I will," Audrey promised. After I talked to Daniel, the Daily Grind was busy with the mid-morning rush when Audrey arrived. She spotted Daniel immediately, seated in a corner booth, his expression grave. Unlike his usual impeccable appearance, he looked slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through his hair repeatedly. "Thank you for coming," he said as she slid into the seat across from him. 2 untouched coffees sat on the table. "What's going on, Daniel?" He leaned forward, voice low. "Someone sent photos of us at dinner last night to the board along with a letter claiming we've been involved since before I became CEO, suggesting I fast-tracked your presentation and that I plan to promote you improperly." Audrey felt the blood drain from her face. "That's absurd. We only met at the bar." I know that, Daniel cut in. But the timing looks suspicious from the outside. The letter specifically mentioned our encounter at Sullivan's bar. Tyler, Audrey whispered, the pieces falling into place. He must have been watching us that night, seen us together at the bar, and somehow found out who you are. Daniel's expression darkened. Your ex. Audrey nodded, pulling out her phone to show him Tyler's text. He just threatened to go to the press. Daniel read the message, his jaw tightening. This is blackmail. I'm so sorry, Audrey said, feeling guilt wash over her. This is all because of my stupid plan to make him leave me alone. Don't, Daniel said firmly, reaching across the table to take her hand. This isn't your fault. The question is what we do now. I don't know, Audrey admitted. HR gave me 48 hours to either transfer to Seattle or end things with you. She gave a humorous laugh. Though there's barely anything to end, we've had one dinner. One excellent dinner, Daniel corrected, a hint of his usual confidence returning. The beginning of something that could be significant if given the chance. His words sent a flutter through Audrey's chest despite the dire situation. So, what do we do? Daniel sat back, thinking. We have several problems to solve: Tyler's blackmail, the board's suspicions, and the HR policy. Let's start with Tyler. I should have gotten a restraining order when he first started showing up uninvited, Audrey said regretfully. It's not too late, Daniel pointed out. Do you still have his previous messages? The ones showing a pattern of harassment? Audrey nodded. I kept everything just in case. Good. That gives us leverage. Daniel's mind was clearly working rapidly. Here's what I propose. I'll have our legal team prepare cease and desist letters for Tyler and any press contacts he might approach. Meanwhile, you should file for that restraining order. And the board HR. Daniel's expression turned resolute. I'm meeting with them again this afternoon. I'll lay out the facts that we met coincidentally before I was announced as CEO, that our personal relationship has consisted of exactly one dinner, and that we're being targeted by a harasser with false allegations. Will they believe that? They'll have to, Daniel said, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. The alternative is accepting that their new CEO engaged in an inappropriate relationship and tried to cover it up, something that would damage Pinnacle significantly. Audrey nodded slowly. And the HR policy at this? Daniel hesitated. That's more complicated. The policy exists for good reasons. Power imbalances in workplace relationships can be problematic. So, you're saying we can't? I'm saying we need to figure out what we want and then determine if there's a way forward that respects both the company's interests and our own. Audrey felt a surge of emotion at his use of we and our, as if they were already a unit facing this challenge together. What do you want, Daniel? She asked softly. His blue eyes met hers with startling intensity. I want to see where this could go. On dinner was enough to tell me there's something real here, something worth exploring. Audrey swallowed hard. I feel the same way. Daniel squeezed her hand. Then let's solve these problems one by one. Starting with Tyler, their coffee forgotten. They formulated a plan. Audrey would go directly to the police station to file for a restraining order. Daniel would contact Pinnacle's legal team about the cease and desist letters and prepare for his meeting with the board. They would reconvene that evening to assess their progress. As they were preparing to leave, Daniel suddenly stilled. I just realized something. If Tyler was watching us at Sullivan's, he might have followed you before. He might have known you work at Pinnacle. Audrey considered this. It's possible, but how would he connect you to Pinnacle before the announcement? The company has been preparing for the CEO transition for months. IT wasn't public, but it wasn't exactly a state secret either. If he has connections to anyone at Pinnacle. Ryan, Audrey said with sudden realization. My cubicle neighbor. He and Tyler knew each other through a recreational basketball league. That's how Tyler and I met in the first place at a game Ryan invited me to. Daniel's expression hardened. We need to look into that. If an employee is feeding information to someone attempting blackmail, that's grounds for termination. The next few hours passed in a blur. At the police station, Audrey presented the officers with Tyler's pattern of harassment, the repeated calls and texts showing up uninvited at places she frequented, and now the blackmail attempt. Given the evidence, they agreed to process her restraining order request immediately. Meanwhile, Daniel met with Pinnacle's legal team and then with the board, presenting the facts of the situation without embellishment. As he later recounted to Audrey over the phone, the board had been initially skeptical but ultimately concerned about the harassment and blackmail angles. They agreed to postpone any decisions about the potential relationship policy violation until the immediate threat was addressed. By late afternoon, Audrey received confirmation that her restraining order had been approved. Daniel's call came minutes later. Legal sent the cease and desist letters. He informed her, and I've asked it to review Ryan's communications. If he's been sharing internal information inappropriately, we'll find out. How did the board meeting go? Daniel sighed. Mixed. They're concerned about appearances, but also about setting precedents for how harassment of executives is handled. Several members were surprisingly sympathetic once they understood the full situation. And us. Did they say anything about that's still unresolved? Daniel admitted. But I have an idea. Can you meet me at Pinnacle in an hour main lobby? Is that wise? Won't that just fuel the rumors? Trust me, Daniel said. I think I found a solution. An hour later, Audrey entered Pinnacle's lobby to find not just Daniel waiting, but also Patricia from HR and Vera, the COO. Ms. Mitchell, Vera greeted her formally, though her expression was considerably warmer than during their earlier meeting. Thank you for coming. Daniel stepped forward. I've been discussing our situation with the executive team, and we believe we've found a way forward that addresses everyone's concerns. Patricia nodded. Mr. Harrington has suggested a structural reorganization that would eliminate the direct chain of command issue. What does that mean? Audrey asked, confused. It means, Daniel explained, that we're creating a new marketing innovation division that would report directly to Janet as CMO, completely separate from my oversight. You would head this division based on the strength of your recent presentation and past performance. Audrey blinked in surprise. You're offering me a promotion. One that would have happened anyway, according to Janet, Daniel clarified. We're just accelerating and restructuring it to address the current situation. This arrangement, Vera added, would satisfy the policy requirements while allowing you both to pursue a personal relationship, should you choose to do so, without any appearance of impropriety. Audrey looked between them, hardly daring to believe this might actually work out. The board has approved this conditionally, Vera nodded, pending a formal review of your qualifications by Janet, which she's confident you'll pass easily. And there's one more thing, Daniel added. It has confirmed that Ryan Peterson has been accessing confidential information about executive movements and sharing it outside the company. He's been terminated effective immediately. Audrey absorbed this news with mixed emotions. While she had never been particularly close to Ryan, it was still shocking to learn he had betrayed company trust so severely.
So what happens now? She asked.
Now, Patricia said, handing Audrey a folder. You review the details of the proposed position and let us know your decision by tomorrow. Meanwhile, our legal team continues to address the harassment issue. After a few more details were discussed, Vera and Patricia departed, leaving Audrey alone with Daniel in the lobby. You did all this in one afternoon? Audrey asked, impressed despite herself. Daniel smiled, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. When properly motivated, I can move mountains. Thank you, Audrey said sincerely. You didn't have to go to such lengths. I wanted to, Daniel replied simply. Then, after a moment's hesitation, there's one more thing I should tell you. What is it? Tyler contacted me directly after receiving the cease and desist letter. He claimed to have more evidence he was prepared to release. Audrey felt her stomach drop. What happened? I met with him, Daniel said. At Audrey's alarmed expression, he quickly added, with our legal team present, it turns out his evidence was nothing. A few context-free photos that proved nothing inappropriate. When confronted with the legal consequences of his actions, he backed down completely. Just like that? Audrey asked skeptically. Well, there may have been some financial incentive involved, Daniel admitted. Not a payoff, but an agreement where Pinnacle won't pursue damages for his defamatory claims in exchange for his silence and compliance with the restraining order. Audrey shook her head in disbelief. So, it's really over.
Just like that.
Just like that, Daniel confirmed. Although, I suspect we'll be the subject of office gossip for quite some time. I can live with that, Audrey said, feeling the weight of the day's stress finally lifting. She glanced down at the folder in her hands. So, Marketing Innovation Division? Is this a real promotion or just a convenient solution? Both, Daniel said honestly. Janet has been advocating for this division for months, and your name was at the top of her list to lead it. We're just implementing it sooner than planned. And us? Audrey asked, finally addressing the question that had been hovering between them all day. Where does this leave us? Daniel's expression softened. That depends on what you want, Audrey. I meant what I said earlier. I think we could have something special, but only if you're interested in finding out, too. Audrey considered everything that had happened. The chance encounter at the bar, the unexpected connection she'd felt with Daniel from the very beginning, the way he had moved mountains to create a path forward for them. It had been chaotic and complicated, but through it all, she'd glimpsed something rare and genuine. I'd like to see where this goes, she said finally. Starting with that good night we never got to finish. Daniel's smile lit up his entire face. I'd like that too, but maybe somewhere more private than the Pinnacle lobby. My place, Audrey suggested boldly. I make a mean pasta carbonara. Sounds perfect, Daniel agreed. 6 months later, Audrey stood in her office. A real office now with walls and a door befitting her new role as Director of Marketing Innovation. The division had been a tremendous success, implementing many of the strategies Audrey had outlined in her presentation and developing new approaches that had already increased customer engagement by 30%. The professional transition had been challenging but rewarding. The personal transformation had been even more profound. A knock at her door drew her attention from the report she'd been reviewing. Daniel stood in the doorway, casual in jeans and a sweater rather than his usual suit. Ready for our weekend getaway? He asked. Audrey smiled, gathering her coat and bag. More than ready. Where are we going again? It's still a surprise, Daniel replied with a mysterious smile. But I will say it involves a sailboat. As they walked through the office together, Audrey marveled at how much had changed. The initial gossip had faded as people witnessed their professionalism and saw the success of Audrey's division on its own merits. What had begun as a desperate ruse in a bar had transformed into something neither of them had expected, but both had come to treasure. In Daniel, Audrey had found not just a partner, but a champion, someone who believed in her abilities and supported her growth. In Audrey, Daniel had found something he'd given up hoping for after Camille. A connection that balanced his drive with genuine joy. Someone who saw the man beyond the CEO title. By the way, Daniel said as they stepped into the elevator, I received an interesting email today. Apparently, Sullivan's Bar is celebrating its 5th anniversary next weekend. They're inviting loyal customers to a special event. Audrey laughed. Are we loyal customers? We were there exactly once. True, Daniel agreed, taking her hand. But it was quite a memorable visit. Kiss me just for a second. He's watching, Audrey quoted with a smile. Little did I know what I was getting myself into. Any regrets? Daniel asked, his voice light, but his eyes searching. Audrey reached up to touch his face, remembering that first impulsive kiss and everything that had followed, the challenges, the revelations, the growth, and most of all, the unexpected happiness she'd found. Not a single one, she replied, standing on tiptoe to kiss him properly as the elevator doors closed behind.